Chair, we're now live.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. A warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Resident Services Select Committee. My name is Councillor Bridges and I am Chairman of this meeting. Key role of this committee is to monitor the performance of local public services within its remit and to hold in-depth reviews on topics of resident interest. We engage with a range of external witnesses in our activity, which can include community groups, residents and subject matter experts. Where we identify areas for change or improvement, we make recommendations to the decision-making cabinet. Details of the business to be considered today are shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room and also accessible on YouTube underneath the broadcast. For those present in the room and intending to speak, please note you will be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. And for those in the public gallery, you will not be on camera. A reminder to councillors, officers and those speaking today that you should turn the microphone button on when speaking. This will ensure you can be heard in the room and by those watching online. Some housekeeping rules before we go on to our main items. There is no fire alarm expected this evening. However, if one sounds, please follow the officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting point, which is the Civic Centre forecourt. Mobile phones to be placed on silent or switched off. And we also have resident feedback forms available both in the room and on YouTube underneath the broadcast. We move on to item 1. Apologies for absence, please.
Apologies have been received from Councillor Janet Gardner, with Councillor Sutal Punja kindly substituting this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Warm welcome to Councillor Punja. Welcome back. And also, I'm sure Councillor Gardner is watching online, and we do wish her a speedy recovery. Item 2, declaration of interest in matters coming before this meeting. Are there any? I see no indications. Item 3, to receive the minutes of the previous meeting, pages 1 to 10. Are there any issues? Thank you very much. I can confirm that all business this evening will be discussed in Part 1. There are no Part 2 items. And we move on now to Item 5, which is the Strategic Climate Action Plan. For all of these items this evening, we will not be having officer presentations. They will just be going straight to questions. So the Strategic Climate Action Plan pages 11 to 58. Ian, welcome this evening. I will now open this up to questions from members, please. Councillor Punja.
Thank you, Chair. I feel like it's appropriate that I start this off given my background in environment, and Ian, I know that you know some of the things that I might be saying in this thing as well, because I have referenced it before. We've got a few points, and I just wanted to go back onto this carbon offsetting that is being part of this this action plan, which we spoke about at the July meeting, I think it was, and the tree planting. But what I wanted to say is a specific reference to biodiversity in this, and because it's been uplifted, you know, we've seen it a couple of times, but I just want to know how that is being monitored, because we've talked about carbon offsetting, we're looking at tree planting, but where is biodiversity mapped out in there? Because I can't see that in this action plan.
Thank you, Councillor. Good evening, Chair. I think it's a very good point, because it's not currently mapped out. We are doing a lot of tree planting. The next stage of this strategy, which is the sort of the higher end, is into action planning phase and trying to work out where we're going to be planting our trees next. What else are they going to be achieving? What else are we doing in terms of biodiversity? How can we start to double count the benefits of various interventions? So that's the next stage of the work for the next 3 years. So this plan is where we're getting to for the next 3 years, so it's the 3-year cycle. And biodiversity will feature heavily in that. We also have other statutory biodiversity functions that came out of the new recent Environment Act. So that work is already underway. We've got some consultancy, we've got some grant funding from DEFRA to do some consultancy work on mapping out where we go with biodiversity, which will link heavily with our tree planting, our green space management. So it's trying to link all the things that we're doing already, and just capturing some of that information, and just making sure that if we are tree planting, what is that doing for biodiversity? If we are doing biodiversity improvements, what is that doing for carbon offsetting, so on and so forth. Not quite there yet, but we are. That's part of the next 3-year cycle.
Councillor Punja, your follow-up?
So you are following my thinking around that, which I thank you for. The other part of what I wanted to ask about was the infrastructure, because obviously with climate change, we have both melting tar mats, whether it's flooding, all this infrastructure, whether it's drainage blocking, I didn't quite get that in the action plan either. And infrastructure is a cost to the council in terms of repairs and that. So how is that being handled, and is that part of a future action plan, or is that not in?
So the strategic climate plan is sort of the overarching plan. We've got a multitude of other sub-plans that sit below this, so things like the electric vehicle charging strategy, sustainable transport plans, and so on and so forth. So this is sort of like the overarching plan for the council. In terms of flood risk, we had our local flood risk management strategy approved earlier in the year, so that was adopted, and that sets out our approach to managing flood risk. And obviously, climate change is a big factor in that getting worse, and we've seen the events from September. So flood risk sits within my team as well. So I've been managing the outfall from that, which has been horrible. 100 plus properties flooded in Ruislip. No one wants to see that, but that's just another indication of what climate change is doing and the pressing challenge that we have with that. Flooding is very, very tricky because there's a lot of different players involved. Thames Water, ourselves, Environment Agency. It's really the system's not been designed really to facilitate collaborative work and to get those results, but that's what we've got to work through. A plan has been adopted, and we're starting off on where we need to go with that. We've got 14 flood risk projects that we've got across the course of the borough, so we're in terms of accessing funding from the Environment Agency, we're really quite successful at doing that. Our next stage is trying to identify, ideally before events like September happen, where we can have those interventions. But so for example, up in Ruislip, we now have a project that we're looking at around Victoria Road. So there's a critical drainage area up there, which will hopefully prevent some of the flooding that we saw in September happening again. Unfortunately, we can't be overly preemptive all the time. There's a lot of flood risk in the borough. So sometimes it is a reaction to where has flooded sets our priorities. So that's just unfortunate. But that is part of the longer term plan that we have with Thames Water and the Environment Agency.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Ian. I thought the report was quite comprehensive, and it was encouraging to see what the council's plans are for the future. One thing I wanted to get a bit of clarity on was what kind of mechanisms are in place to ensure that the community has ongoing education to reduce not just our collective carbon footprint as a council, but their own individual carbon footprint too.
Thank you, Councillor. I think that's been a really massive point for us on, and you'll see from our scoring of our progress against some of these objectives. I think it's fair to say our community leadership role hasn't been quite as strong as it has been elsewhere. Our agenda has always been to get our own house in order first, but the priorities are now changing for the next 3-year cycle. So you'll see in the plan the People's Assembly is being lined up for 2026. That'll take a bit of time just to collect all that, but importantly for 25-26 is going out to all the schools using some of our Section 106 money that we've got from developers to go out to schools and do a proper engagement campaign. Not talking about league tables amongst schools. I know league tables aren't always the best, but getting schools, our own as well as some of the others, to put together their own carbon footprint and engaging with the students as well, because it's obviously the future. The kids are just as important to get those on board. So yeah, that is all part of the next 3-year strategy. That is a real priority for us in 25-26.
Councillor Gohill, your follow-up?
Yes, thank you. My second question is just around the longevity of the project and safeguarding it. So, with rising energy costs and kind of limited funding opportunities from the current government, how can we ensure that local decarbonisation projects are safeguarded for the future?
I mean, now is a very tricky time to be starting to be doing anything different and new around, interventions, trying to find some funds to do this. So we do capture quite a lot of Section 106 funding, and that's later on the agenda tonight as well, in relation to carbon projects. But the way that this council has always tried to do things is not to spend extra money bolting carbon or climate change onto work streams already. That's not necessarily the most efficient way. It's trying to embed that within the teams themselves. So, I was speaking with CMT last week, and it's not about someone, say, from Highways team coming down to ask what do they need to do to manage carbon. It's about trying to upskill that team to understand how they can embed carbon right at the start. So that will ultimately, over time, deliver a more efficient approach to carbon management, climate change, and the response that we need to do for the climate emergency. It takes a bit of time to do it that way, but it embeds it longer term, and then that safeguards some of those projects that we're looking to achieve.
Councillor Davis.
Thank you. What I want to talk about flood risk, really. This is my question. What advancements have been made in flood risk management since the last review, or the last plan, I should say?
I mean, in terms of advancements in flood risk, if we're talking about how we're doing better in terms of minimising risk, so we have we've secured Metis Consultancy now who undertake our flood risk management work for us. So we're now geared up for the next 3 years with a delivery model. As I said, we've secured more funding through that route as a consequence of working in partnership with the consultancy. We've got a number of projects up across the whole borough. We've got one being implemented at the minute over in Ruislip at King's College Road, a new rain garden up there. We've got other projects that are at various stages of development, and we've also delivered quite a few recently as well. Some of them worked very well in the recent flooding, but what the recent flooding also told us is that there's still a long way to go. We're also, one of the big approaches at the minute is natural flood management, so using council green space, and this goes back to the point that Councillor Punja made, is how can we do things differently within our own borough, joining a lot of different things up. So tree planting, if you do it properly, can help flood risk. So that's the next stage for that. So we're doing a lot of work on natural flood management. So I'd say we've made quite a lot of progress in the last couple of years. I know Councillor Lavery has been very supportive of the approach that we've taken. Some of that has meant we've had to remove, sort of come away from resident engagement, which isn't ideal. We can only do so much, and project delivery is where we've been focusing. But now in the next couple of years with that, we will be going out to residents and engaging a bit more as well. So, resources are tight, but we are trying to manage it effectively within that.
Councillor Davis, you have a supplementary?
On resources, I'm glad you mentioned that. How are you prioritising the resources to the most impact, to get the most impact? How do you do that?
Is that in terms of flood risk?
No, sorry. Overall,
climate.
yeah. So how do you work out which will have the most impact for residents or for the council?
Yeah, so our priority coming, and you'll see it in the plan, is we try to prioritise funding where we get the most meaningful impacts in terms of reductions in carbon particularly. So projects like the PSDS project, the Public Sector Decarbonisation Scheme, that's a lot of money going into a big project but making a very big saving. So most of the projects that we're identifying are larger scale projects with those kind of savings. So it's always on a carbon ratio, the amount of money that we spend to the amount of carbon saved. That's always our priority. But that doesn't mean we won't be doing what we call soft projects. It's not the most pleasant of terms, but that's the GLA terminology for it. And they're sort of more hearts and minds type project, behavioural change projects, which are still very, very important, but smaller scale. Not very measurable. So if you go into a school, educate kids, you don't actually know how that's going to save carbon in the long run, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not important. And we have been prioritising hard projects, physical interventions, because they're measurable. But over the course of the next 3 years, we'll be doing more of that behavioural change stuff as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to start with EV chargers, if that's possible, to kind of get a bit of an update on how quickly we are rolling them out as there becomes more of a need for them. I'm starting to get emails from residents asking questions about that, but also thinking ahead that I would bet quite a bit of money that in 20 years' time, if all of us are young enough to still be here, are still here on Resident Services Select Committee, we'll be talking about why EV chargers are redundant because we're using things like hydrogen cars, right? So it's more one question around the rollout of the EV chargers and how quickly we're doing it, and the second one is how far ahead do we think? I mean, I know we haven't got crystal balls, but that's just an example of something that I might be wrong, but I guess would be EV chargers at some point in most of our lifetimes will become redundant as we find an even more sustainable, even more carbon-friendly way of doing motor vehicles, etc., etc. Thank you, Ian.
I mean, firstly, in terms of climate change, the EV strategy is more around air quality at the minute. So, because actually the carbon savings from electric vehicles are not quite as pronounced as the air quality interventions. The reason why we do it is, you've still got a EV, electric still has a carbon footprint. So our priority around electric vehicle charging is not necessarily carbon reduction focused, but it is relating to air quality. Our approach is, you'll see in the plan, there's still a requirement to review our approach. So some of our neighbouring authorities have bigger ambitions in terms of the amount of infrastructure. That's because of the ability to do on-street charging and on-street, and that's the real game changer in once you make that leap. So that's part of the next stage of the review. So I don't have the figures as to what our current uptake is, but it's you've got to have the infrastructure to generate the demand. So you've got to be careful about not having too much infrastructure if the demand's not there, but then also you're going to need the infrastructure to challenge to increase the demand. So that's all part of this 3-year cycle to review our approach in terms of electric vehicles. So I don't have the data, but I'm happy to come back and have a chat with the Highways team to get the actual data on the amount of charging points within the borough.
Councillor Small.
Thank you. A slight change of tact onto resident engagement. The People's Assembly obviously will be 2026, but that's a little while away. What kinds of resident engagement are we doing currently, and what more could we do to use many of the expertise, especially in my own ward of Ruislip, where we have many good residents who are doing many good things from Ruislip Woods and beyond? How are we going to engage residents? Because I think it feels like we're waiting until 2026, where I think there's things that we could be doing now. Thank you.
And I mean, again, it's a very good question, but in terms of climate change, we have to be careful about what we mean by engagement. So in terms of flood risk, we are doing a lot of engagement with residents, particularly at Parkwood. We've still got a project on the go, and we've got a working group set up to deliver that project. So in terms of flood risk, there's different bits of engagement. In terms of waste management, so you'll see in the plan as well, there's been quite a lot of engagement with communities on waste management. So these are all the sort of the sub branches of climate strategy. In terms of carbon, and I said at the top, that's not been one of our prominent successes. So that's the work that we're going to be taking forward with the schools that we talked about with Councillor Hill. So that will be going forward in the next cycle. So there has been quite a lot of engagement on a lot of the threads that sit within climate change. There is more to be done, particularly around carbon footprint and reducing the impacts that people have on climate change in that regard.
Councillor Core.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for putting this together, Ian. I just wanted to know if the draft is also available in other languages for different residents to engage with. Can we get a copy of this draft in another language?
I believe it is on request, but I will have to take that one away, Councillor Chair, if that's possible. I will have to engage with our public comms team, but I believe it is on request. I will double check.
Did you follow up, Councillor?
Yes, please. And in terms of terminology, I came across on page 17, some exceptional progress has been made, and on page 29 where it lists very positive, moderate, further development required in different themes. I was thinking if the committee would have found it more useful if we had the breakdown of what within that theme went well and what within that theme didn't as much, to get the understanding, because this is very, very generic. So for us to understand what worked or what not, I think a little more depth on that would have been helpful. Thank you.
Thank you for the feedback. I think it's a consultation document that was designed to be, our front-facing document. It wasn't designed to, be a complete critique of where we've gone before. However, I'm more than happy to, at any point, go through that in a bit more detail. We did some of that in July, and also it's important to note that this committee every year sees sort of the annual status report, annual review of the plan itself, of how we're going and securing progress, and that's always been the port of call for that kind of interrogation of that progress. So maybe that's one for the next time we meet, and to work out whenever it is, it'll be next year now, probably July time, I guess, and really interrogate some of those, how we've been doing and how we see that impacting going forward.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to first ask about page 35. You have the list of the council buildings that are producing the largest carbon. Well, we can see around the civic centre, work is being done. We've got windows that are being sorted out. We know about the heat pumps that are being put in. So a lot of work being done there. I'd like to know what, if anything, is being done to reduce emissions at the crematorium, please.
So I understand, I believe there is a project ongoing to look at how the crematorium will be using energy going forward. Well, that's always a tricky one to talk about. It's gas cremation or electricity cremation, but at the end of the day, it does use a hell of a lot of energy. So there is a project at the minute on looking at that. And again, just coming back to this being the higher level plan, sitting within this is in the family of plans, if you want to use that terminology, is a proper action plan for our corporate properties. So we don't have that yet. So that's something that we've talked about with CMT, is just try to get that understanding of how our assets are going to perform, because that's important for understanding trend analysis. Because as you see, the Civic Centre, and you talked about the windows, it's also accompanied by the air source heat pumps that have gone in. It's a really impressive project, but even when you take that into account, it still has about 1,000 tonnes of CO2 left in it, if you like. Now that will naturally come down over time because it's relying on grid electricity, but our plan is to work out our next stage is, well, what's that going to look like by 2030, and how do we try and get that down to naught? And that's the same with the crematorium, same with all those, the list of 10, and the myriad of other buildings that we have. So that's the next stage of the work. We're not there yet, but it is part of the plans for the next 3 years to come up with that clear understanding of what does each building do, what will each building cost to get down to zero carbon, gold, silver, bronze type projects, and then at the end of it you will have a figure, and that goes into the carbon offsetting approach. So it's that's the plan to get there. We're still sort of at the top at the minute, just trying to work out what that will look like going forward, although we are picking out some of these big win items like the Civic Centre. We are starting work on the crematorium, but it'd be nice to be able to put that into a clear plan to present to this committee as well as the residents and say, look, this is our trajectory down to 2030, and then comes back to the point whether we like the terminology of carbon offsetting or not, but that will give us a figure. How do we get that figure down to naught through carbon offsetting, through other forms of interventions, changes, whatever. So that's the next stage.
Councillor Farley, follow up.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for that answer. I'd also like to know about on page 48. I think page 48. It refers to the housing stock and delivery of cavity wall insulation. When it is delivered, are we saying every council property, residential property, has had cavity wall insulation? I'm trying to understand what this means in that statement.
No, not every quite a lot of the properties. Sorry, Chair. Quite a lot of the properties that we have, we've looked at that obviously need improvements over time, so it's not every single property. There is another plan for our own properties that doesn't actually factor into the 2030 target, but there is another plan for how we manage our properties. So that's not obviously included within this, but we can make that available to you as well.
Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chair. One statement and one question, if I may. Just something following up from what Councillor Farley said, as maybe an example of best practice. I recently, well, not recently, a couple of months ago now, visited Hillingdon Hospital, the back end of Hillingdon Hospital, where they have an incinerator that they use, and it has like a triple filtration system, where they not only use, where there's like medical things that need to be like discarded in a certain way. They run it through the incinerator and they have a triple filtration system, so the amount that actually gets released into the air is minimal, and as much heat as possible is then used back to heat the hospital from what's being used in the incinerator. I wonder if that's something that we might be able to invest in at our crematorium, maybe at the one on Breakspear Road, and just see how we can use what they've done as an example of best practice to help mitigate our CO2 output.
So a very good point. I mean, so we're talking about using waste heat in effect, and you know, it's another topic that we have with data centres, for example. They have a lot of waste heat, so we have those discussions. I think the location of the crematorium would make it very difficult to try and capture that waste heat and then use it, because the infrastructure actually is quite a lot. But it's certainly something I can take away with the team, you know, as part of the project work that we're doing with the crematorium, just to see what can be done with that waste heat. In terms of the Hillingdon Hospital incinerator, I believe that one is online for the next few years, and then it's taken offline. You know, it's got a shelf life on it.
No, they just revamped it, so it's going to be going for the next at least 15 years. But I'm happy to send you some details so you can check it out if you need to. My second question was, it's something that was actually raised in the next agenda item, but it relates to the environment. So you might not have an answer for it, but I just thought I'd ask anyway. According to the data that was given to us about Section 106 allocations, only about 15k of the contract award for provision of an air quality monitoring service was used, and about £215,000 was unused. Going ahead and, you know, to make sure that we're being as effective as possible, can we ensure that the rest of that money, which is already allocated, is actually used towards that sort of thing? I'd hate to think that we're putting forward this entire plan and we're leaving money on the table in that way.
It's a good point. I don't know the specifics of that one, so I can take that one away to double check.
Page 74 on the thing, if you wanted to pick it up afterwards.
74. But in terms of air quality, my team is responsible for the Air Quality Action Plan, which is under review at the minute. We have a statutory requirement to do our monitoring and various things, which is all covered off through the GLA. So we meet our statutory requirements on monitoring for that. There is a lot of work that we need to do for air quality improvements, and that will come out of the next stage of the Air Quality Action Plan, which will be going to Cabinet next year. And then it'd be nice, Chair, I think it would be probably good to present this to that committee at some point as well, to be able to, you know, show you some of the good work that we have been doing in air quality and some of the aspirations we've got going forward. But in terms of leaving money on the table, I don't believe that, I'll let Matthew talk about that in terms of Section 106 in a bit, but that money won't be lost, so that'll just be pulled for the next stage of the work that we've got coming up in the next couple of years.
Thank you. If I could just come on the back of Councillor Gohill's questions. In regards to Breakspear, this committee did a frontline visit to the crematorium last year, and I'm pretty sure, if I remember rightly, the cremators were nearing their end of life span anyway, and we've had new ones installed since then. Does these stats reflect that, or are they yet to be part of this stat going forward?
So these stats are from last year, so they wouldn't be captured just yet. I know there is further work undergo at Breakspear Crematorium, because there's still a trend for quite a large carbon footprint, which we need to consider.
And part of the procurement process would have been to look at carbon emissions as well, so potentially we could have newer machines which may help us in reducing that.
And that's part of the the transparency and the capturing of this work, so that it can sit ideally on the website, so that people can truly understand exactly the good work that's going on, what have we done, how does carbon factor into our procurement rules. Again, the next stage that we're hoping to improve on in the next 3 years.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move on to our next item? We'll finish with there's two. Okay, Councillor Kaur, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Chair. With reference to flood risk management, while West Drayton has not been mentioned, I assume it's also part of the local flood risk management strategy. You did mention that EA is funding much of the work and it's quick to get it. I was wondering if you got the funding to remove baffles on each side of the bridge on the Mill Road, because that's quite contentious and it's probably causing floods within West Drayton area. And would that be useful to clear the Bigley ditches as well? Because then the access water can flow comfortably, not flooding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Just a point of clarification, getting money from the Environment Agency is not quick and easy. It's insufferable, in actual fact. It's very, very difficult indeed. But we try very hard and we have been very successful in securing that funding, but it does take time. That's really important to understand for the Baffles project. So the Environment Agency have different aims and objectives. One of them is to remove the Baffles from an ecological biodiversity perspective. We're keen to understand what that means in terms of flood risk, whether that would actually improve the flood risk downstream, particularly at the caravan parks around Donkey Road and Thorney Mill Road. So that is on the list of projects that on the 14 that is being pursued. I haven't got a timeline for delivery yet. So the way that it works is you have a very feasibility stage, then concept stage, then design. So we're really at the start of the process for that, and that's a project that we'll be looking at next financial year, because that's how the funding is going to be released. So that's in terms of the Baffles. So it will take time, but it is on the list, which is the important thing. In terms of the Bigley ditch and clearing it, that's a function of depending on who owns it. So there is an education piece around flood risk at the minute, which is not all watercourses are managed by the Environment Agency or the council. There are riparian ownership issues, so that's basically whoever owns the river is responsible for making it clear. There's a bit of work around the Bigley ditch at the minute, because the Highways Agency, or Natural Highways, whatever they're called these days, are responsible for some of that. There are other riparian owners who are responsible for it, perhaps don't know that. So there is a bit of work that we're doing with the Environment Agency to understand that in a bit more detail. And finally, just in that particular area, the Environment Agency are due to give us their maintenance plans for the rest of the river course, because I know that's been a big problem with the build-up of pennywort and other types of things in the rivers. So, yeah, it is, again, it's all on the list. It's all part of the what we're trying to work our way through.
Councillor Kaur, do you wish to add anything further? Okay.
Indulging me. On page 54, it says, to investigate opportunities for large-scale electricity generation from council-owned land. I just wanted to understand at what stage is this investigation now, the opportunities for large-scale electricity generation from council-owned land. Thank you.
Very early stages. So we haven't got any clear and feasible or formalised plans at the minute. They're still working through through their inception stages, if you like. So one of the big things about those kind of projects is getting the power from the land to the national grid, and that's normally the biggest issue that we've got. So at this moment in time, we don't have anything clearly, firmly established. There are things being investigated which would have to take away, because some of that is at really early stages. But at this moment in time, there isn't a clear plan. And that is another thing for the next 3-year cycle. Again, coming back to the point that this sits above, is trying to make some progress on that, because that would help us not have to work our way through to other forms of carbon offsetting. So if we produce energy over there, then technically we could carry a carbon footprint over here. So it's all part of that end game to get down to naught.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. Sticking with the Environment Agency, you've essentially sort of hinted at my question anyway. I forget which, it was earlier this year or before, but I did ask about our relationship with the Environment Agency and if it has, or whether it's been able to be improved, because it has been quite tricky working with them. I was just curious to know whether or not that has improved, or it's much the same, or worsened, sadly.
So in terms of the funding, when I said that it's, accessing it is insufferable, I think it's important to say that's just because of the process of it. I think in terms of working with the Environment Agency, we've made some really good strides recently. We met with the regional director, with Councillor Lavery and other officers from the Environment Agency. And I think that has borne fruit in the projects that we're seeing that delivered. We've obviously got the Parkwood project, which we've now just had our first our inception meeting with a couple of weeks back. Pin Meadows project, which is funded by the Environment Agency, funded by DEFRA, but facilitated through the Environment Agency. We had our first meeting on that last week as well. So we have made a lot of progress with the Environment Agency, a lot of positivity. We're all obviously struggling with resources, so that's got to be really, really tight going forward as well. But I think we've established the relationships now, so I would say it's in a better place. All these things could be improved still, but I would say it's improved considerably from where it was.
Supplementary.
Thank you, Chair. That's good to hear, because I say my recollection was that it wasn't as good as it could be, so that's positive. The only thing I just want to follow up on with is something that Councillor was referred to, which was the People's Assemblies. Why is it that it's the back end of 2026 that the first one is going to be proposed to take place? If we're trying to engage with residents and get potentially ideas and things from them, why are we waiting another couple of years before we even have one?
I mean, it's a tricky one because, I would like to do everything, or we would all like to do everything as soon as we possibly can. I think it's one of resource, it's one of priorities. I think, so as part of this plan, we prioritised doing the schoolwork this year with our Section 106 consultancy fund. I mean, the document is out for consultation. So, if we, and I would encourage anyone who's listening to make comments, and if it comes back through that consultation process that the priority is that we would really like to bring that much further forward, then we would obviously take that on board and factor that in. But at this stage, it really is about where we see priorities, and it comes back down to the point that we were talking about. Where can we prioritise? So we've prioritised measurable, deliverable outcomes, which is why we've sort of not done so well with the community leadership thing, because that's not necessarily always a measurable outcome. So we're tackling schools this year, and then the People's Assembly comes after that. If we want to bring it forward, that's something I can certainly take away. But at this moment in time, it really is just one about programming and priorities, what we think we can deliver within the time frame.
We'll take final questions from Councillor Punja.
Thank you, Chair. I actually have just one question and one statement, and I'll start with my question first. I see that on page 57, throughout the document, they was talk about the air quality action plan and the targets towards air quality, and monitoring is becoming one of the big things that's throughout this paper. And so I want to ask you about monitoring, because it needs equipment. And we often find that we don't have the equipment to be able to do the monitoring of air quality, especially when it comes down to planning applications. So where are we sitting in terms of investment into our monitoring, or how are we monitoring and what are we monitoring?
That's a big question. We have what is called an annual status review, which is our annual monitoring report in terms of air quality. So I will happily, after this, Councillor, point you in the direction of that, just to show you what is going on. So there's different types of monitoring in terms of air quality. There are automatic monitoring stations, which are funded and set up by DEFRA, and they're sort of in hotspots, mainly in the south of the borough around Heathrow and Hayes, and they are constantly chugging out data, and that's captured on websites. So you can actually, there's various websites where you can get real-time data from of air pollution in relation to the borough. Then there's also that's supplemented by diffusion tube monitoring. So we have a huge range of sites across the borough where they're just sort of small scale bits of equipment that are attached to lamp posts that are put up once a year and then collected once a year. They go laboratory testing, and that forms part of our annual status review. So in terms of air quality, we actually have quite a good scope of equipment, and that is all paid for out of Section 106 funding, which is, and we've got 3-year contract, and we've got a new 5-year contract that we can hopefully set up to ensure that we've got that going forward. So there's a statutory requirement which we fulfil. Under the Environment Act, there has been a requirement now to monitor PM 2.5, so that's the small fine particles that are mainly from diesel cars and other things like that, which are really problematic. So that has only just come in as a statutory requirement. So we are now, as part of our Air Quality Action Plan for next year, working out what do we need to, in addition to all our existing air quality monitoring, which is normally NO2, which was the previous hot topic. PM 2.5 is now the issue, and that's a lot harder to monitor, but we still need to do it. There's no target as to how far we want to monitor, but we know we need to tackle the hotspots. We have air quality focus areas, and which we will be tackling for extra monitoring. That will be set out in the Air Quality Action Plan review next year, because that target only came in last year. So hopefully that's answered your question, but I will get that air quality status report to you, and then that will sort of give you a bit more indication and also give you the information attached to it.
Thank you. And if I may, I'm going to end with where I started, which is then speaking to the strategy document, which basically claims that it strives to be London's greenest borough. And we are not going to achieve that by being carbon offsetters. We are only going to be achieving that by being biodiversity creditors. I'm going to leave that with the statement, because I hope that will be somehow embedded into future documents.
Thank you very much. Thank you to members for their questions, and also to Ian for your attention in answering them. You'll note that the recommendation is requesting the committee's comments, and I would like to propose, with the committee's approval, that these comments are formed by myself in consultation with the Labour lead outside of this meeting. If you're in agreement, I'd also like to apply that to also items 6 and 7, which also requires the committee comments, if we're happy to proceed on those bases. Thank you very much. Ian, thank you again for your attendance. You may leave if you wish to do so. Item 6 is the infrastructure funding statement 23 to 24, pages 59 to 108. Matthew, very warm welcome to you this evening. Like the item before you, we will not be going to a presentation, we'll be going straight through to questions. So I'll now open it up to members. If there are any, please indicate now. Councillor Gohill.
Thanks. I suppose my question is just a continuation of the question I asked to Ian about the monitoring funding that was on page 71, I believe. If you could just maybe comment on how that not how the 15k was used, but why there was 215,000 pounds left in that fund from, or has it since been used? And I just want to get a bit more clarity on that, if possible, please.
Hi, thank you for your question, and hello everybody. This is my first select committee, just joined Hillingdon a year ago, so hello, and it's great to be here. I guess just in response to your question, there's always a bit of a lag in terms of when money is received and then when services are able to pull together enough money to be able to deliver a project, and obviously money comes in at different trigger points. So as Ian said, the money will be spent, we've got an obligation to spend it, and yeah, I'm sure Ian can provide details of the proposed interventions at a later stage. But yeah, it will be spent, and it's probably just to do with that lag of collecting and being able to build up enough in the pot to be able to deliver something.
Councillor Gohel, do you have a follow-up?
I do, and secondly, welcome to the Select Committee. My next question was just about the developer contributions towards affordable housing. We've got figures from 23-24. Do you have any information on how that compared to the previous years before that?
Not specifically on affordable housing, but we have seen a reduction in our 106 and seal contributions as a result of reduction in kind of major projects that are coming in through the planning process. And then the affordable housing money is earmarked against our affordable housing programme that our housing team lead on.
Councillor Davis.
My question is, sorry, I'm extremely tired today, so we'll start again. Transparency with the seal money, etc. Is there a way the public can see how it's spent? Is that in the public domain? Because I haven't been able to see anything.
The IFS is published online. So.
Oh, is it? I couldn't see it on there. So, yeah.
Okay, we can send you a link. Yeah.
I'll take that back. Thank you.
Any follow-up at all? No. Okay. Anyone else? Councillor Farley?
Thank you, Chair, and welcome. Thank you. This isn't, please don't take offence to this. You're in fresh, but we get this annually, and while I acknowledge, and this may be good down to your good works here, the report still, even though it's been asked for several times over the years, and given that we were told there was a new system coming into play which would provide what I'm going to say in a moment, it hasn't materialised in this document. What we were told the new system could do would be that it would provide a linkage between the revenue generated and linking it to the spend. While we've got information here, this doesn't provide that. It has been asked for numerous times, and again, we're presented with a report that doesn't give that clarity. So we're all for transparency. I agree with Councillor Davis certainly on that point. But it's understanding where the revenue has come from, Section 106, and where it is being spent. And that's something that's probably more a request again, that we're able to get that. And in terms of my question, sorry, Chair, the sort of linking in with what Councillor Gohill was talking about, I've got some concerns with the fact that the balance has increased over the year that we've got the data for here for the Section 106. So we've got an unallocated balance, or on page 72. Sorry, forgive my voice. I'm not. So on page 72, we've got the Section 106 balances. So we had an opening balance, 25 million. We've had additional balances added, but only had a spend of 1.3 million, and the balance was close to 29 million at the end of March 24. So more than half of it was unallocated. I've got, and I don't know whether this information data is available, I've got concerns over, you mentioned specifically about the climate change funding, but generally speaking, I'm looking for what kind of risk we've got of losing some of these funds because of time constraints and when they have to be used by, and the age of these balances, and when. So we've got 60 million of unallocated cash, which, what is there any risk of that being lost? How old is it? So these are the things I've got concerns about. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess in response to the first part of your request, we are uploading all of the information onto a new system we've got called Exacom. We are trying to, I want to see that. I think that'd be actually a really good news story if we can show where developers' money is going towards infrastructure and community projects. So certainly that's something I would want to see. And then in terms of the risk of losing money and the balance, I mean, there's a number of reasons why money that's coming in isn't spent straight away, and we've talked about the need for pooling and projects can't be developed until all the money's come in, and there's a number of different reasons in that sense. But we aren't at risk of losing the money, because we're very clear at knowing what our trigger points are and making sure we're prioritising projects that might be near expiry date. But the team kind of work very closely with those trigger points. And one project I want to do myself, just as I'm new to the council, is to look through all those balances and see why those projects haven't been delivered, or is there a way of pooling slightly differently to do some other interventions that meet the same objectives of the obligation. So I want to do that exercise myself, and happy to report back on that at a future session. But yeah, this is quite normal in terms of the money that's held by the council, in terms of the 106 contributions. And I mean, some of the money's held for external organisations like the NHS, which until they come up with a project, we can't release the money. So there are a number of different reasons why we might see that growth in the money that's held. But I think to give reassurance, it's quite normal, and there's lots of different reasons why that might be, and we'll feed back in terms of how we're going to try and get some of those projects delivered, and how we can promote the successes as well. Thank you.
Councillor Farley, you wish to follow up?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'm just also aware that, at least certainly has been the case in the past, that some of these Section 106 funding have been time limited. So I get the whole point about trying to pool resources and that sort of thing. That's fine. We just if there was, and if you're assuring the committee that there's no risk, then we'll take that. That's fine. But I just sort of just to raise that as a concern, because it doesn't present here as whether there is or there isn't anything of that nature. Going back to the system, I know you just say the data's still going into the system. We've been told this before as well. What kind of time frame do you anticipate this exercise to get the data into this XCOM, was it? When do you anticipate that being completed, so all the historical data's in there, and then we can get what we were after? Thank you.
And yeah, just to clarify, obviously there's always a risk that money can be paid back, but we obviously look to prioritise getting the money out the door that's closer to its expiry date. And there's also the option to renegotiate with the developer if there's a better project or something that would fulfil the obligations better. XCOM, I think we're about, Angie will probably shout over at me, we're about a third of the way through reconciling all the data on there, and I think it's been about 3 or 4 months doing that, so it's hard to commit to a date, but within the year we'd want to have everything fully updated on that system, and we're already using the system for new obligations coming in, so it's just about getting through that reconciliation.
Councillor Smallwood.
Thank you, Chair. Some quick fire ones, I guess. Do we have any leeway over the charging schedules for SIL, or does that, and I can see there's like a small addendum here, the SIL Regulation 2010. I have to say I have not read it. I hope people will forgive me. It wasn't my bedtime reading, but I just wondered if we had any leeway to do that. Following on from Councillor Farley's point around the sort of 16 million of unallocated balances, and I was really interested in your answer. Whilst I don't necessarily think we need a total breakdown of everything, if you suddenly said to us 12 million of that was to do with the NHS, and we were waiting for NHS projects so it's protected, I think the committee would be feeling an awful lot more comfortable. We'd be going, oh, that's fair enough, we're just waiting for the NHS projects to come along. But it'd be interesting to see how that is broken down. I'm not saying total detail, but sort of like the top lines of, this is the amount for the NHS, this is projects that are like 3 years ago. This is 2 years. This is 1 year. I think would be super interesting. And then just as councillors across the committee have said, it would be interesting, possibly if possible, in the new system to get a breakdown by award as well. As councillors, we get excited by things like that. Probably we're the only ones that do, but it is helpful for us to know what's going on in our wards and where it is. I mean, some of it you can work out by just looking at the project's name. You know, Eastcote Hockey Club bizarrely is in my ward. I know that's to do with Ruislip and the work we did there, but I think that would be helpful as well, and would alleviate some of the concerns that the committee has around project to payment and then where that falls in a ward. Sorry to do 3 there, Chair.
Thank you. Well, in terms of the seal charging, we do have cabinet approval to look to redo the charging schedule, so that there is that is in progress, and once we get the kind of resources together, we'll go out and start the consultation process on that. So that will hopefully bring in some more cash for the council. And yeah, certainly, you know, I think that sort of data, knowing where the money's come from, where it's gone, we could look at where the money's collected by ward. Sometimes it's spent within the vicinity and it's sort of slightly outside of the ward, in terms of where the projects are, if it's a big public realm project or carbon offset project. But yeah, we can certainly drill down with the numbers once we've got all the systems up and running. Because again, it is really helpful to be able to show to members of the public where money's coming from, where it's going at that level of detail. So sort of see a big scheme that's come forward on their street and know that that's contributed to improvements to the road or the school or the local park. So yeah, I'd certainly like to see that completed as part of our work we're doing at the moment. Was there a third part of that kind of?
Yeah, the 16 million, the 16 million, and being able to break that down into.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If we can tell that as an action, then.
Councillor Small, do you wish to add anything further before we go on?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chair. My questions surrounding the MPPF, so the National Planning Policy Framework, and the impact on Hillingdon. I suppose my question is, how are we as a council going to mitigate the impact of the government reducing the emphasis on housing delivery targets in order to save the back of the Mayor of London, which sort of risks diminishing Section 106 contributions to the borough. For context, for members in this room who might not know, the National Planning Policy Frameworks reduced Hillingdon targets by 36%, and whereas demand's gone up exponentially in that period. But I suppose my question is related towards how is this going to impact the longevity of our Section 106 contributions that we will, from the document we can see that they're going towards good projects.
Thank you. I can never say either. I just go with MPFF, the Planning Policy Framework. So, I mean, we've fed back to the government in terms of our response to the consultation. Our housing targets are set by the London Plan, which we align to, and we're waiting obviously for updates to the London Plan in the coming years. So. I don't see necessarily a reduction in kind of our housing targets. If anything, probably a bit more. So, yes, I'm not sure if that answers your question or if there's
if I may, through
more
you, Chair.
context. Thank you.
Well, I suppose it's fairly safe to assume the London Plan's going to echo the national framework in a very similar way, just because of the stakeholders involved in that. So, assuming that the London Plan also, puts forward a reduction in the housing targets for the borough, how are we going to mitigate the diminishing Section 106 contributions that will get as a result from less planning?
If it's okay, can I come back to you on that? Because my understanding it'd be increased. But yeah, let's if I come back to you on that. Thank you.
Councillor Core.
Thank you, Chair. Some of the money spent is visible, like in terms of projects, you see where it's going. It would be interesting to see how the training part of it, like who has benefited. Is it a lot of it NVQ training scheme and money has gone into training, to see the tangible benefit, like how many people have benefited. If there's a data of how and who it has benefited would be helpful. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, we have an organisation called Qualify Me who run our apprenticeships and our construction obligations. So yeah, they do provide regular updates for us, and that is something we should include in a more detailed IFS, which we can take that action.
Your follow-up, Councillor Cool.
Thank you so much. So Qualify Me is like a third-party contractor that sets everything for us. Okay.
Yeah, they broker the opportunities, work with the developers, ensure that the apprenticeship hours are met and they meet their kind of training requirements, and then report that back. And if there's any issues with the developer, we can get involved. But they basically manage that service for us.
Thank you. Thank you, John.
Any other questions before we move on? Thank you very much. Thank you for that, Matthew. You're up on the next one as well, so don't go anywhere. We move on to the engagement on the draft Uxbridge Town Centre vision, pages 109 to 238. Again, there'll be no presentation, so we'll go straight to questions, please. Anyone wishing to ask a question? Councillor Gohill.
Thank you, Chair. I suppose my question is on the impact of national insurance increases on local businesses, and have we put any plans in place to prepare for the negative impacts that we might have as a result of these national insurance increases, which could deter investment into Uxbridge?
Thank you. Well, it's a good question. I haven't seen any direct impacts as yet. We haven't had any feedback from businesses, but we have been, as part of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund, running a lot of business support programs in the borough, working with business support providers who are supporting our businesses to grow and to be resilient in the borough. So it's something we can try and get some initial feedback from those providers to see if businesses have raised this. We do, as part of the Uxbridge vision, want to ensure that the businesses can remain resilient and can be supported to stay and thrive in Uxbridge. So this is something we can work with the businesses on and see how we can see what support they need. But ultimately, if we can create a really thriving town centre where there's kind of more footfall and more investment into the area, then hopefully that will help to balance any increase in costs.
Yeah, I suppose national insurance doesn't help with all of that, though. My second question is just regarding what kind of feedback mechanisms we have to make sure that both residents and local businesses have more of an active role in forming the vision for Uxbridge. How are we communicating with them, and is the communication constant, I suppose? And if not, what can be done to improve that?
Thank you. As part of the Uxbridge baseline work that was completed before I started, Brunel have been appointed to do a lot of that initial engagement work with us, and the council's been working closely with Brunel and a town centre working group that was established as part of that. And as part of all of the engagement, over 1,000 people have been spoken to and engaged with and consulted with. As part of the programme, we've had the last kind of 9 months just working with stakeholders and understanding all the various needs, and have produced this draft vision. The plan now is to go back out to that community and the wider community to get further engagement, further feedback on what's been proposed, and hopefully establish something that's had the buy-in from residents and businesses. In terms of ongoing engagement, I think that's a really important point. As you know, the teams are quite small. We have one regen officer that's leading on this work. but I think working closely with the BID will help us in that process, the Business Improvement District, understanding, because they obviously know their business community, getting their feedback, and trying to just keep an open dialogue with local groups who want to work with us and speak to us about the ongoing work in the town centre. But it is tricky, and it is important to keep that open dialogue.
Chair, through, can I just make a quick statement?
I'll ask if anyone else wishes to have a question first, and I'll come back to you afterwards. If there's anyone else who wishes to ask, please indicate now. Councillor Smallwood.
Get it on. Just around history and heritage, I read with interest about Fountains Mill and then had to Google it and learned a little. I didn't know, but I just wondered around how the history and heritage of many things in Uxbridge can be celebrated with this town centre plan. I mean, I think about, I don't know whether people know, when you look up outside Uxbridge Station, there is two wheels of a train. I don't know whether anybody knows that is there. There's old cigarette machines. Don't know if there's any cigarettes in them because the coins don't exist anymore. But how are we going to protect the history and the heritage, or champion it, showcase it, show it, and make people and protect it when we do this? Possibly like we haven't done in the past, because I'm sure there's lots of things in and around Uxbridge Town Centre, and I can't think of anything in particular off the top of my head that I go, there's a bit of history. How are we going to protect the heritage and history and champion it?
Great question, and the Regal Cinema, that's one that springs to mind, and which we are actually going through a process of trying to protect that building after new owners took over and hadn't realised that the building was listed. So we are actually taking action to protect our listed buildings. We're looking at our conservation areas to make sure that the evidence base is sound in terms of protecting areas of the town centre. And I agree, with all the kind of clone towns and town centres that are all quite similar with businesses moving in, multiple businesses and corporate businesses moving in, they can feel quite samey. So having the heritage buildings and the streets like Windsor Street and these old buildings really brings a unique aspect to the town centre, and it's something we should definitely lean into in terms of drawing people to the town centre and showing our uniqueness. So I'm supportive of that process, and we do protect those buildings, and I think celebrating them is really important. Obviously the bunkers just outside of the town centre, and trying to drive footfall and making that more of a destination for local shoppers is important. So we are actually trying to improve that connection to St Andrews from the high street as part of the vision.
Councillor Small.
Yeah, whenever you walk in other than at Christmas where there's that lovely tree, or when the tree light's been turned on, the Civic Centre forecourt is just an underutilised asset. So I was delighted to see that there was plans for that. What sort of engagement are we doing early doors with community groups so that we can celebrate the community groups, the music, the theatre, the small businesses, the things that make Hillingdon great? How are we going to engage with them to allow them to be part of that sort of like Hillingdon brand, and using the asset that is that forecourt more pertinently?
Thanks. Yeah, I guess now we've got the mandate from Cabinet last month to go and continue this conversation. I want to meet the town centre group that was formed as part of the initial work. We've got 3+ months of engagement through this current draft. So as part of that process, we're going to meet with the local schools, meet with the college, make sure we're meeting with the local community groups. And interestingly, I noticed on social media yesterday there were some young people running around the town centre on TikTok talking about what do you love about Uxbridge, and it's just making me think, wow, we should definitely use some of the new media and engage with young people through different ways rather than just doing the consultation online and our usual routes into engagement. So and if you've got any suggestions, I honestly would welcome them, and if you've got any connections to send my way, please do, because we want to make sure we get everyone's buy-in for this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councillor Punja.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, when was this document, this vision created? Because it says September 2024, it couldn't have been.
Yeah, it was produced last year. It was meant to
Produced last year.
Basically waiting for Cabinet to give us the green light to continue to the next phase. But it's had some iterations to try and shore up some of the projects throughout this year in conversation with TfL and other stakeholders. But the bare bones of it, of the master plan hasn't changed too much after the baseline work was completed by Brunel.
Yeah. Okay. I just wanted to highlight something that was on page 138, which actually is something I believe in, which I think I asked why it was created, because it must have been created, and I just kind of then want to ask about how much the council is going to pay attention to this, because it says on page 138, the library has consistently been identified as one of the strongest features of the town centre. It is well loved by local people and is considered a central hub, an important civic space and an attraction for visitors. And that's I assume this is a public document now, which means that it was created then, it's coming to a select committee now, and it's going to be forwarded on, and the library is going to be no more. It's going to be moved, and that building is going to then have to have something else happen to it. So,
sorry, Chairman, can I just put on record that the library still will be in Uxbridge? It is not going to be no more. Can we make sure that's put on record? Sorry, just for clarity.
Well, for clarity, it
Thank
says
you.
here the library is consistently been identified, and it's talking about the building in which is on the high street. It's not talking about the moved building. So, this is what it says in this document, and so I'm just saying that I'm asking the question, how much is the council going to be listening to this vision and looking at this vision, as these are parts of the town centre's strengths, and there's lots of other things in there, but one of those strengths has been moved from the high street in a prominent space to another space. So whilst it might still be in Uxbridge, it's not in the space which is considered a central hub, an important civic space and an attraction for visitors.
Thank you. I guess in the overall document, it highlights the civic centre as the community focal point for the town centre, and we should try and focus activities there. So obviously the library has moved, but the aspirations of the vision do talk about the civic square, the civic centre, and trying to make that more of a community hub, working with the NHS and other partners. So yeah, I think the vision has delivered on what's being identified in the engagement and the consultation, and yeah, I think as Councillor David has mentioned, the library is still in the town centre. I mean, I don't know if that's my place to comment on any further decisions on the library, but it does still meet the objectives of the vision in terms of being the community space or the community hub being part of the civic centre.
Yes, indeed, and for the record, it's 300 metres that the library has relocated, so it's not on the other side of town, so to speak. Councillor Punj, do you have any questions further to that before we move on? Okay. If there's no other questions, Councillor Kaur... Sorry, no, Councillor Davis, then Councillor Kaur.
Thank you. How are we going to monitor whether this vision is working? Because it's great having this pack, it's going to be brilliant, we've got the new investments, etc. But how are we monitoring that what we're putting into place is working?
We have a number of indicators, so vacancy rates, number of or footfall into the town centre, number of new commercial space and residential space that's built in the town centre, and so yeah, it's still to be worked up into a framework for us to monitor against. But yeah, there'll be a number of indicators that we can use to keep track of that.
So will that be ongoing? So even after the development, the change has happened, will we still be monitoring? Do we have the capability of quickly adjusting something if it didn't work? For example, we opened up the whole of the high street to traffic. Is there a way? It's not in there, of course, but is there a way that we can adapt and change quickly if we need to? Is there a fail-safe as such?
Yeah, I think it'd be part of an ongoing conversation with some of the key stakeholders in the town. the vision will also form part of the local plan work we're doing as well, which is a kind of 15-year plan for the borough. So, we'll be monitoring through that mechanism as well. But yeah, that's a good point.
Thank you.
Councillor Court.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering if there was some sort of cost analysis or an idea of some kind of funding base around which this vision would be backed upon, or were you given was it created just as a vision and then funding will come at later stage depending on what is agreed, or was there an idea that this is what we would be able to spend? So is there an understanding of kind of spend which is expected out of this vision? Because I didn't see anything at all as of now, but I'm sure when you're working to a major project like this, there should be some funding in mind.
Yes, that's a great question, and I guess there's two parts of it. One, coming back to some of the questions around the 106 and the sort of infrastructure spending, we need a plan and the project to spend money on. But the main objective of having a vision and a document like this is to draw money in, so investment from the private sector into the area, but also when we start applying for grants from the GLA and the government, we need something that we can get buy-in from those key stakeholders, and then funding to help us deliver some of the interventions. So it's certainly there's no set budget to deliver this, but it will be used as a way of bringing in money to the town centre.
Councillor Cool.
And it also mentions that because there are plans to get residences within the town centre, it says town centre has comparatively small population but is already growing, and there is scope for significantly more. Scope in terms of growth of population, or scope in terms of the town centre accommodating more people? It's on page 18.
I think certain parts of the town centre, in terms of the office blocks, we've seen increase in vacancy rates. We know that to deliver a thriving town centre, we need a combination of diversifying and rejigging what's in the town centre, so there's more vibrant activities, but also more residents in the town centre or in the vicinity of the town centre. So it doesn't have to be exactly within the ring road, but sort of making connections just further out so we can have more residents easily accessing the town centre will be the objective. So more people living, but also more people being able to access the town centre in a kind of sustainable way.
Any other questions before I move to Councillor Gohill, Councillor Davis, and then Councillor Farley, and then we'll finish Councillor Gohill.
I've seen in the report, I can't actually find the page, that there is some problems with transport links. How engaged has the Mayor of London been with supporting to bring additional bus routes? Have we opened the dialogue? I know Cabinet has contacted, but we've had no response. So I was wondering if you guys have had any luck.
Yeah, we've got a dedicated GLA regeneration manager that covers West London that we work closely with, and through that contact we have been meeting with TfL and TfL colleagues to kind of look at the art of the possible and see what we might be able to do in the town centre to improve those bus routes, but also thinking about the different assets in and around Uxbridge to see what the opportunities are. So we've certainly been in contact with them and working with them.
Thank you.
Councillor Farley.
Thank you, Chair. This is quite a hefty tome to go through. There's a lot of information in here, and there's obviously a lot of reference to having the Civic as being a community hub. But one thing I am aware of, there's lots of charity and third sector entities which look for space, which, particularly with Uxbridge, has a cost attached. I would like this document to have something that's reaching out and sort of aimed at that sector, because it's not particularly prevalent in here, from what I've read anyway. So unless I've missed it, apologies, but I've been through it and just I didn't come across much in that regard. So it's possibly more of a request that there's an addendum or whatever in some of the narrative that encourages, particularly when it comes to enabling charity and third sector entities to have locations where they can host events and things which have a sort of a nominal fee attached to them, because say that particularly with Uxbridge it is rather expensive or difficult to find places which are, when they're trying to do a charitable endeavour, lots of their funding is taken away by hefty rental charges and whatnot. The other aspect of this document, I have to say, really going through it, I'm a little perplexed as to. So this document is the council's vision, even though it's been sort of drafted by Brunel and others, but it's owned now by the council as their vision that's going out to consultation. It's just that there's a lot in here which I'm not. I mean, it links back to what Councillor Davis was saying about monitoring and being able to sort of judge whether it's been a success, because a lot of this is actually outside of the council's control. It's a vision, all well and good, but then I'm just not wholly sure who the target audience is and whether or not there's. Because again, it's a big document, and trying to sort of make sure we've got a good consult. Because another failing of that we've spoken about in this committee is engagement with consultations and trying to encourage more people. Is there anything which is that we have that's going to possibly summarise this in so it's actually got something which is more sort of the meaty pieces, which are going to maybe pull people in to actually look at the document or give them a stronger and briefer grounding in what's in this document, without having to go through hundreds of pages of all good intention stuff. But there's a lot here, and I fear that we're going to be possibly in a similar situation, that we're not going to have a good response to this document, other than potentially businesses, which obviously have got a vested interest, but others that may not have the capacity to wade through this. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess coming back to the first part of the question, I would see this more of a joint, not quite co-design, but a joint vision for the town. So we're using feedback from everyone that we've spoken to inform the vision, and the council's now trying to take that forward to produce something that we can all use, whether it's businesses or residents or investors. So yeah, to see it as a sort of joint vision for the town. We're due to deliver a final vision next year for Cabinet. So I think that the feedback from today, and I'll note that, is that we need to make sure we're clear in terms of our monitoring framework as part of that document, so people can see how we're going to monitor it, and that's both what the council does in the public realm, but also how our stakeholders will also commit to their part in this, in delivering the vision. So I think I'll take that back. Thank you for raising that. In terms of the third sector, it's important to raise the actual business units. I know there's business rate discounts that the third sector can capitalise on, but we do want to try and do more things with the civic square, so in terms of markets and events, and that would always be nominal or free for people to use. So using our assets better, I think, is important, and we're planning to do that. And yeah, I mean, again, open to other suggestions on how we might be able to support the third sector, and I think again, taking away your comments, having something in the document to that effect it sounds like it's needed, and we can add something in there for that. So thank you. It is difficult to deliver a vision and a document that people can buy into, but I think that the reason it was set up, and I think we have some money from the GLA to help get it going. I think we saw Uxbridge as slightly struggling, like lots of town centres are, and it needed something to try and promote the town centre and all the good things about the town centre, but also produce something that's a bit of a marketing tool to encourage people to invest again and encourage people to come back to the town centre. Because I grew up in Ealing, and I used to come here as a kid, and it's definitely changed. It was the big place you went shopping, and then it became the place you wouldn't really go to, and now it's about how do we re-energise and get it back up there as the key kind of West London metropolitan town centre that attracts people from beyond Hillingdon. And I think that's what we're trying to get to, the vision, is just to have that sort of document that everyone can buy into and everyone can promote and be proud of, and get that investment we need. So and we have actually done a summary document. Just that was my other thing. We've done it. We produced an 8-page. We took that feedback from Cabinet. We have got an 8-page summary document that goes online, and we'll share. Liz, we'll share that round if that's all right.
Thank you. We're going to finish this item off now with Councillor Gohill, please.
Thanks, Chair. It was literally the tiniest point, literally the smallest point. It would
The
have been
floor
nice
is yours,
to just say
on your like.
Thank you. Just wanted to... I could drag it out, but no, I won't put anyone through that. I just really wanted to ask if we were making sure, relating to, well, my question is so long ago now, is about feedback mechanisms. Are we using Hillingdon people to drive the engagement on this vision? And if not, can we? It's a yes or no question.
It is in the latest edition, as far as I know. We did put that in, so I haven't seen it yet, but it should be in the latest edition.
Thank you. Matthew, thank you for your attendance and answering your questions from members today, and a warm welcome to you for joining the Council. We hope you have many happy years here at the Council, and we look forward to seeing you at future meetings. The forward plan, item 8, pages 239248. Thank you very much. It's because Janet's not here. I was looking and she wasn't there. Sorry, Councillor Gardner. And item 9, the work programme. Happy on the Labour side as well. Have to be fair, Okay. Thank you. And, yep, Liz, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just on the work programme, just to let you know, let councillors know that in terms of our review, we are going to be working, there's a bit of work going on outside the meeting in respect of the recommendations with the Chair and the Labour lead, and we will be bringing back some recommendation ideas to the meeting in January for consideration of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes the business for this evening. The meeting now declared closed at 8:28. Thank you all very much. Good night.